Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. This is another episode of Justice for All Now. I'm your host, Hena Zuberi, and you're watching us on Muslim Network TV. You can watch Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and always on muslimnetwork.tv. So today I am very, very excited to host a guest that I've known a long time online, but this is the first time that we've actually been able to are going to be able to have a conversation on a topic that we're both very passionate about. And the bond that has been created is because of the Rohingya people and both of our work in trying to get as much education and advocacy out there for the Rohingya people since many, many years ago. And so I'm really grateful for Shabnam Mayet, who's here with us. She's an experienced advocate based in South Africa, in Johannesburg. And she's a skilled researcher, strategist, and advises on international human rights related issues. She's been a passionate advocate for Indigenous and minority rights and has co-founded the South African-based awareness organization Protect the Rohingya in 2012, and often is invited by media to provide analysis on the Rohingya genocide by the Burmese military. Now, as you all know, the Burmese military has conducted a coup, and the exact same generals who committed and ordered the genocide of our Rohingya brothers and sisters are now in charge and in total control of the country. There are many, many nuances and analysis that we could do for ages on what was this coming, the election that happened. We had been pushing for a fair and free election. The United States has a big stake in the establishment of democracy, quote unquote, in Burma. And a lot of people do ask us this question too: why do we insist on calling it Burma when the rest of the world has moved on and calls it Myanmar? So first thing first, the Rohingya people call it Burma. They do not accept the terminology Myanmar because they believe that's a military imposed term. It essentially means the same thing. And also the United States government has also not officially accepted that terminology. And the US government still in its papers calls it Burma. So welcome, Shabnam. Thank you so much for being here. And so I wanted to force the audience to know more about your work with Protect Rohingya. When did you all start, and what has the journey been like? And then we'll get into a discussion of what is happening here in the United States and in South Africa.
Well, assalamu alaikum to you and to your audience. Thank you very much for that kind introduction and for having me on the show today. Protect the Rohingya began in 2012 as a response to us, watching the news and seeing that this group was being persecuted and we had never even heard their name before. So a group of friends decided we're going to start with an online presence, and from there slowly we began to host Rohingya brothers coming into the country on tours and screenings. And we have something that's been running since 2013, and it's a social media campaign called #BlackForRohingya. And every year on 13th of June, we ask people to come out, wear black for Rohingya, put a message on social media. And alhamdulillah, as the years have gone, the campaign has really grown. And so we also offer advice and suggestions for people who want to run projects for the Rohingya. We give analysis to the media, but also over the last few years, we've been running projects in the camp. So we had the good fortune of being the first group of lawyers on the ground 3 months after the genocide in December of 2017, where we took a set of legal statements, around 60 of them, from Rohingya who had escaped the genocide, and we then made those available to legal teams around the world who wanted to bring cases on behalf of the Rohingya. We also then in 2018 ran a summer school for South Africa, went to school in Bangladesh, because often when we think about education and rights to education, we always think about little children, and rightly so. But as a lot of the half million Rohingya children are not allowed into a formal schooling system, especially the older ones. So we wanted to do winter school for students between the ages of 15 and 25, and we wanted to give them a university experience because, as you know, Rohingya were not allowed tertiary education for many years now by the Burmese government. So we had that project, and then we also have a history project where we're trying to document some of the histories and cultures of the 350 villages that were destroyed during the genocide. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the work.
And where is this?
And of course, on social media.
And where is this history project being archived? Does the public have access to it?
So at the moment, we're just collating it because, of course, as you know, Rohingya is not really a written script, right? And so what we've done is you have to then take the interviews in an oral history manner. And so we have young volunteers in camp who then go to the elders from various villages. Of course, a lot of the elders have been killed, and they document. They ask them a set of questions that we've worked on, and then they document the answers to those and then translate them into English. And inshallah, by the middle of this year, we want to put it up online and make it available so that Rohingya from all over the world can add information about their villages. And so future generations of Rohingya, even though those 350 villages were destroyed, some of them have 600-year-old masjids in them, they'll be able to know where they came from and what were the stories of their villages and the well-known people of their villages and the songs and the stories their grandparents told in those villages, inshallah.
And that's so important because, as you know, the United Nations current map does not include Rohingya village names on it. And this is something that, we've advocated for that push, and it's terrible. It's a terrible. So if they even were repatriated, where would they go back to? Those village names have been erased and bulldozed. So this is something of a real concern, and this is something that Jewish survivors tell other genocide survivors, is that document everything, because the part of genocide is that erasure of a people's history, their language, their culture, their food. I was actually telling the young woman from Malaysia who's just now come. She's a Rohingya activist, and she's now settled in Texas. And her name is totally slipping my mind right now. And so that she needs to start documenting recipes of Rohingya recipes. And so
it might be Sharifa Shakira.
Sharifa, yes. Alhamdulillah. So the other day she posted a TikTok video of how she was making a Rohingya dish, and it's so that it's so important. So what was the response of the South African government? Have you all done advocacy on your own government, and what has been their role in genocide determination or any sort of action since 2012? If you could walk us through that.
So unfortunately, South Africa initially responded very slowly and poorly to the Rohingya situation. Some analysts say this is because we're part of an emerging economy bloc called the BRICS, where we are part of it with China and Russia and India and Brazil. Although there were some statements put out during the genocide, we're now also a signatory to an Asian cooperation agreement. Perhaps South Africa will start, using some power to make some headway there. And recently, initially, South Africa voted very poorly on Rohingya issues at the United Nations, but then last year began to vote for human rights in a much more positive way. So, inshallah, of course, we hope for change, but to date, the South African government has not had a great reaction on the subject.
So what about after the coup, even after, because democracy sometimes gets people more fired up than a genocide, unfortunately, as we can see right now. What has been the reaction of the South African government?
Well, at the moment, a lot of the news is around vaccines and the arrival of vaccines and how vaccines will be rolled out. But we hope in the coming days that there will be something. But I'll keep you informed as soon as we know.
Okay. in other parts of Africa, where have you seen a positive response to the Rohingya people, aside from the amazing country of Gambia, who has taken the case to the ICJ? What else can you share from that part of the world?
Well, I guess Muslim countries have made statements in the past, but of course, no one has done anything anywhere near Gambia. And of course, we are so proud that Gambia is an African country bringing this matter to the ICJ. It's incredible. And of course, the Attorney General, Mr. Tambadou, has really been a hero for all of us and made us really proud as Africans.
Yes, and that's something that we wanted to share, was that he has been, we made several efforts on this, and he's being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. So several professors and organizations and whoever can make those nominations across the world have nominated him. And so this is not news yet, but we hope that this will make better news than Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. That made news, and so Tambadou's nomination hasn't, which is just the sad state of affairs that we're in. So from our end, I'd like to share with our audience and with you, Shabnam, as well, that today the Biden administration launched a new sanctions regime in response to the Burmese military coup. Now, sanctions is something that we've been pushing for, especially as the Burma Task Force, for the past since 2012, and since in 2016, when Obama lifted those sanctions in order to ease the way for Aung San Suu Kyi. We decried that as a humongous mistake, and what has happened right now is pathetic. It is pathetic. And we absolutely believe the way the US government treated Burma and the military there, and the lifting of the sanctions and trusting them to take measures that they should not have been trusted with. People have to understand this is not a regular military. This is one of the only militaries in the world that can fund themselves. They're not funded by the civilian government. Majority of the businesses in the region are owned by this military. And so if you'd like to comment on that, and then I'll go on with what the Treasury has put out.
So, of course, the military conglomerates have amassed a fortune, and they have their hand in everything from gems to communication to cellular networks to infrastructure, real estate. And so the one way is definitely targeted sanctions of the military, because over the years, more than 50 years that they were in control of the country, they amassed a huge amount of assets. And I mean, just today, the US said that they have an estimated $1 billion worth of assets sitting in the US. And that's just one country, not even, their own country. And so definitely targeted sanctions is the way to go. And also, it's very important to ask, when you're sending aid to Myanmar, where is that aid going? Because a week before this coup, or just a few days before this coup, around $350 million was made available by the IMF for COVID relief to the Burmese military unconditionally. And it was a very quick handover. It didn't even come in bits and pieces. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, around a large amount of that, a large percent of that was, money that the US gives to the IMF. So it's very important to always follow the money trail and ask, where's this money coming from? Because what you're doing when you're training the military, when you're buying, when you're buying arms, and when you're giving money to aid in the country, is you're literally rewarding the military for bad behavior.
Exactly, and this is this is where we're getting a lot of pushback from, especially a lot of allies on the left, on what sanctions mean. And sanctions here mean very different from what sanctions mean in other countries, because of what exactly what you said, the force of the military and the influence that they have in that society, that no one can do business unless they're doing business with the military. So it really has to their sources of income really have to be impacted. Especially, okay, let's take a look at what the Biden administration is saying in response. So giving just a little bit of background for those of you who might be tuning in right now and may not know what is going on in Burma. On February 1st, the Burmese military overthrew the country's democratically elected government in a coup, detaining civil leaders, imposing a nationwide internet shutdown, and blocking access to social media sites. They took control of the reins of the government. This takeover removed the state councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, which she had turned her backs on the minorities of her country and especially the Rohingya. She went into ICJ, the International Court of Justice, and defended her government. And now then defended the military, and now the same military has turned their back on her and has put her in detainment. And they removed also President Win Yet from power as well. And this would have been on the same day. February 1st would have been the day that they would have been sworn in as Burma's newly elected parliament when the elections took place in November 8th of 2020. So now the U.S. government is demanding that the Burmese military should immediately restore power to the democratically elected leadership, and the state of emergency release all those who are unjustly detained and respect human rights and the rule of law. What has been missing from this rhetoric is the genocide. This is very concerning for many of us, because this is the exact military that has been the perpetrators of this genocide. This is the same military that has been attacking and oppressing minorities in the north, the Karen, the Kachin, the Shin. And so for them to just take that focus and this whole focus on democracy, like in any way during the reign of Aung San Suu Kyi, the oppression against the minorities in that country had been decreased in any way. So this is something that I'd want to discuss in detail with you, Shabnam. But just to give a little bit of detail of who all has been a part of the Treasury, has designated 10 current and former military officials responsible for the coup. And 6 of these are part of the National Defense and Security Council and were directly involved in the coup. So the commander-in-chief, the deputy commander-in-chief, the first vice president, and several lieutenant generals. But what is missing, so they have also sanctioned the Myanmar Ruby Enterprise, the Myanmar Imperial Jade Company, and the Gem Cansri, which is one of the largest gems exporters, gems and jewelry company in Myanmar. So as a result of today's actions, what we'll see that all properties and interest in property of the individuals and entities that have been named, that are owned, that are in the United States or in the possession or in the United States will be basically taken over by the US government. So what is your reaction to hearing that news, Shabnam?
I mean, it's wonderful. It's the first step, along with New Zealand, who said that they will suspend all high-level communication. They will also ban travel by military leaders, and they will look at where the benefits of their aid programs is going. I think arms embargoes are essential, though. I mean, looking at how recently Russia has sold drones that they have also used in Syria before, and these drones have all sorts of capabilities. But it's good that you mentioned about Min Aung Hlaing specifically. I mean, he was the person who was the architect of the Rohingya genocide, and he literally called it unfinished business, Rohingya in the country, unfinished business, right? And also for the past 6 days, just to add to what you were saying, protesters have come out into the streets in the most amazing ways, thousands of them, doctors, teachers, lawmakers, students, and the military, for its part, has basically threatened those coming out to protest. It's also used live rounds, rubber bullets, water cannons. There have been military vehicles in the streets, and the people have been resilient. Unfortunately, yesterday, one of the protesters was just 19 years old, and she was fatally shot in the head, and is currently in hospital from what I understand. So it's really amazing for people who had, been through two military coups that were extremely brutal and repressive. I suppose they know what happened to their country. Political prisoners had really long sentences. The internet's been out, radio's been out, TV's been out for a while. It seems that citizens are using VPNs, SMS groups, calls every hour to various townships. More than 90 townships were protesting. The interesting thing, though, is that Rohingya, who have always been despised by the rest of the country, have been standing in solidarity and have been sending out beautiful messages of support and photos holding up the three fingers, the sign that the Thai protesters used, also the sign, as I understand it, I've never watched the movie, but from the Hunger Games series. So it's also heartening to see the people coming out into the streets like that. The fear, of course, is repression by a very brutal military regime. And I think that's why it's so important for all of us outside the country to support them, and to amplify their voices, because you never know when the military's crackdown will turn bloody. It has in the past, in 1988 and 2007.
Exactly. This is a very, very brutal regime. This is not, I mean, most militaries are horrific killing machines, but this specific military is, and it's sanctioned by many monks in the country. It's supported by many monks, and they have fought against their religious, like the Saffron Revolution that took place, where peace-loving monks stood up against them, and many were killed during the Saffron Revolution. So this is something to be, we feel for the people of Burma. We have solidarity with them. We wish they would have solidarity with our Rohingya brothers and sisters as well. And it's very important, as you mentioned, that the word Rohingya is mentioned again and again while we talk about this. Can we talk a little bit about what has happened? I do want to mention that President Biden has also spoken in the fact sheet that was released by the White House. He has spoken about Burma directly with leaders in the region, including Prime Minister Modi and President Xi. So this gave me quite a little bit of, I didn't know whether to chuckle or to shake my head or to what to do with that piece of information.
So, both those leaders share. Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So both of those leaders share over 1,000-kilometer border with Myanmar, and both of them, President Modi occupying and oppressing Kashmiris in the most violent, brutal ways, and of course the Uyghur re-education camps, being run in China, and the horrible human rights violations that we're hearing about there. Fine company to speak about the situation in Myanmar, of course.
Definitely. So, and just to make clear that these sanctions so far, $42.4 million of assistance that were going to benefit the government of Myanmar. So one of the things that the U.S. government is doing is redirecting them from the government to support programs that strengthen civil society and the private sector. So this will be an interesting, trail of money to watch, how that supports. I remember many, many years ago sitting with the State Department and talking about like strengthening, like they wanted to know what can we do. And one of the things that we're seeing is the Gen Z out on the streets and so social media savvy and so not willing to take what the military is dishing out to them. And this is something I don't think the military was expecting. This is a totally new breed of young people who are not taking it sitting down. So this is very exciting to watch. Shabnam, can you comment on what is happening? So the UN session just happened, on the special session on Myanmar just took place. So can you comment and let us know what has happened, what transpired?
So the special session, there's a resolution that the UK put forward a few other countries. It's looking like 14 or 19 of the 40 something countries are supporting this motion. Russia and China, of course, concerned that the votes were virtual. I haven't seen more just as yet. I think that the idea here, or the thing that we need to push, of course, is the ICC referral. I mean, this is really important, and I think an arms embargo. These should be the main focuses.
It's absolutely. So, India, Russia, Israel, all three are large suppliers of arms to the Burmese military, and so this is an arms embargo is absolute necessary. I was just at a rally on Saturday with in solidarity with the Karen people, and that was one of their asks as well, was the referral to ICC. Can you explain, as a international human rights lawyer, how would that function? What would need to happen?
So, the EU as well has the sell arms related, they're basically calling it, I think it's called something like anything but arms. And the whole idea is positive relationships with countries who are developing if they have good human rights protocols. And so the whole idea is we don't want to be selling arms to countries that are perpetrating genocide, right, at its most base level. And Israel has done that in the past. We know China, India, Russia. I think there have been drones from Jordan recently. And it's a huge problem because you know that you are selling arms to a country that is then going to be using them on a civilian population to perpetrate a genocide or to inflict military brutality. And, of course, we know that internationally arms is huge trade and big money. But then when we want to talk about human rights, we have to be able to put our money where our mouth is.
Mm-hmm. And what would a referral to the ICC take? Who can refer someone to the ICC? If, for the sake of our audience, if you could explain that.
So there have been cases at the ICC which are being brought by various groups which are looking at specific individuals and targeting those specific individuals. So like Meng Aung, like military generals, different to the ICJ matter, of course, where here is only states bringing claims. And it's going to be interesting because people have actually been analyzing about whether this whole coup will have an effect on the case at the ICJ. But we have to remember that when we're looking at the ICJ, a state, is going up against another state. And so regardless of whether the NLD is in charge of the country or the generals are in charge of the country, the matter continues. However, Myanmar has brought two objections recently. As you know, there are provisional measures put in place where they have to report every 6 months about what they've done to protect the Rohingya and preserve evidence. And what they've said now is that they are objecting on the basis of could Gambia actually bring this matter? And there was one other ground, the jurisdictional ground, because they are not a party, I suppose. And so all of the objections have not been made public. But now Gambia will have an opportunity until around the 20th of May to reply to the objections that have been put forward.
Exactly. And as so part of Burma Task Force work, we have been following how they have been complying with the orders of the ICJ, and I can tell you they're miserably failing, and obviously with this coup. Now, but they did bring it at, from what I understand, at the United Nations, they did bring in the repatriation of the Rohingya people as a condition. Can you explain that to us further?
Okay, so basically, what has been happening with the repatriation is that suddenly, Min Aung Hlaing, one of the things he said was he would bring back the displaced people in Bangladesh. Of course, not referring to the Rohingya by name, but recently, some articles have been saying that military commanders have been going around Rohingya villages, and they gave something like if I'm not mistaken, $350 to a mosque and some food in Mingala. Of course, this is a famous place because in 2012, during the riots and the violence against the Rohingya, 130,000 Rohingya were forced into concentration camp like conditions where they still remain up until today. And all of a sudden, the military is making a round speaking to Rohingya leaders just this week. I mean, it sounds pretty strange. Bringing the Rohingya back at this stage, when we're speaking about safe, protected, dignified return, where the Rohingya are part of the consultation and where there's accountability for what they've been through, the military leader who called them unfinished business, suddenly bringing them back just sounds a bit strange. Also, Bangladesh has put forward a list of around 840,000 Rohingya names, of which only 42,000 of those names have been checked by Myanmar. And the idea of returning them to their own villages is not exactly possible because around 350 of those have been totally wiped off the face of the earth. So I don't think that bringing the Rohingya back into this, when the 600,000 Rohingya who live in Rakhine State live under the most dire conditions. 130,000 of them live in concentration camps. They need government permission to marry. They can't go to school. They can't own land. They cannot travel. And a lot of people don't understand this. The same way we speak about Palestine and checkpoints. There are checkpoints in Rakhine State around Rohingya areas, and they need permission just to travel to the next area. And so many of them, have been arrested and charged for traveling within their own country without the documentation they're supposed to have. They don't even know what that documentation probably is. And so to bring them back, it just sounds like a disaster, or perhaps an opportunity for the military to finish the job they started.
Exactly. And this is one on their agenda. One of the agenda items is to take care of ethnic strife. And what does that mean for a genocidal regime to take care of ethnic strife? And this is the reactions that we've seen. Aside from the solidarity, people are scared to death in the camps, whether they are in Kachin women living in camps in the Thai border, or Karen border, Karen state and Thai border, or there are Rohingya people in Bangladesh. And this is, this is so concerning. To bring them to make that offer to Bangladesh to repatriate them at this time, to what? To totally finish them off. And these are the people, they have weapons, as we've just spoken about, the top grade weapons from Russia and India and Israel, and many of those who are ethnic people from Arakan Rakhine State, who fled the Tatmadaw. That is what the Burmese military is known as. A worry that they are going to go back into the past military era. How would
also,
you?
Hena, reports have shown. Sorry, Hena. Reports have also shown how many of those Rohingya are suffering extreme depression, mental health issues, PTSD, and you're going to give them back to the military that did this to them. I mean, when we took our witness statements in 2017, this trigger warning. We spoke directly to women, not one or two, but many who had literally been raped by gang raped by the military, and who then, while they were being raped, when their children cried for them, those children were taken in front of them and thrown into burning fires while they were still alive. I mean, this is the level of violence we're speaking about. This is, one of the first times in my life where I heard, that girls would be tied to rocks and then raped to death. I mean, this is the type of brutality that this military has unleashed on the Rohingya. Do we really even want to begin a negotiation at this stage with this military government?
Definitely. I mean, this is. Thank you for bringing it up, because I think a lot of people forget. They forget when, and then the images that come into mind is just of the camps in Bangladesh. They don't remember. We just had the show about this recently with Shafi Rahman, where he was showing as he was standing at the Bangladesh Burma border, and they were coming in just shakes you to the core to see what kind of state they were in, the ones that had managed to escape, and the Tatmadaws' contempt for human life, their and the hatred towards the Rohingya people. To hand them back would be an atrocity at this time that the international community would commit on these the most persecuted people in the world.
Because a million people don't just wake up one morning and decide this is the home that we've lived in for 800 years and we're going to run for our lives away from it. Like something really extreme has to happen for them to react in that way, and something did.
Yeah, exactly. This is so right now there's also activist campaigns all over the world. Many are against corporations like Chevron and Total and other oil companies who have investments in Burma. What else are you seeing? What other advocacy or activism are you seeing internationally?
So there's also the dirty list out, and that's by the Burma campaign or the task force in the UK, and that's a brilliant list because it's done a lot. They've done a lot of research to speak about all companies that are doing trade with the military, and there are solidarity marches in other parts of the world as well. But I think the main thing to do right now. Sorry, I lost your question for a bit, but I think that the main thing to do right now would be for the international community to come out in solidarity, and for countries who haven't in the past, like my country, for example, South Africa. I think now is really the time to take a stance, because I think when it came to the Rohingya issue, unlike with the issue of Palestine, with the issue of Sahrawi, many countries just stood back and didn't really say much.
So true. And I fear for the IDPs who are still inside, so the internally displaced people. Remember, there's still about 450,000 approximately Rohingyas still stuck in camps inside Burma, as well as Burmese Muslims of many different ethnicities who are terrified at the current moment because they know that they will be used as pawns in this game. And what do you have a large Burmese community in South Africa?
So we do have, but we didn't really work with them because initially, just remember, like a lot of the Burmese community, didn't really address the Rohingya situation because they didn't really see them as people who belong to Burma. Let's put it that way. And so there was a lot of negativity from the Burmese community around the world to the Rohingya, and I suppose that just mirrored what the state itself was doing. Sorry, just to go back to your question, the state about the ICC, because I missed it. So there can be a Security Council referral, but there can also be state party referrals. But also the other mechanism we have, because we're always waiting for the UN, the ICC, or the ICJ, countries who have ratified the Rome Statute and made it law in their own countries, or countries who depend on universal jurisdiction, can bring matters in their own courts, because a lot of countries, agree. The law is basically, when we look at the Genocide Convention, certain crimes are so vile, that they're the problem of countries everywhere. And so when we look at the Burmese Council, the Burmese Rohingya Council in the UK, they've brought universal jurisdiction a matter in this similar way in the Argentinian courts. And Australians a few years back, when Aung San Suu Kyi was set to visit their country, brought a matter in their courts. And so we also have to find, as lawmakers and as activists, we have to find lots of alternative ways, and we have to try all these different avenues, because as you know, you're working hard on the ICJ and ICC matters. It takes time. It takes a lot of time.
Yes, I have been, right now we're just reacting to a lot of, as activists have been coming out with for example, the Kachin community has asked people to come out and bang pots and pans because that's a part of their tradition, to show solidarity. And some people are wondering if these actions of solidarity have any effect on militaries like the Tatmadaw, who basically don't care. They don't really need the money from anywhere. They have strong partners like China to support them. They've grown their ties with China in many, many ways. And ASEAN countries around have also been sort of meh about what they have done, even post the genocide. One of our concerns here at the Burma Task Force has been specifically, we're welcoming these sanctions that are coming out from the White House, but we want more. We welcome them. This is a great first step, especially after the lackluster. Mitch McConnell has been blocking every effort to be made to pass any of these sanctions for the past 4 years. Imagine if we'd passed them 4 years ago. And now, when his personal friend Aung San Suu Kyi has been put behind bars, now he's consulting with the Biden administration and has been really for these sanctions. And this just reeks of the hypocrisy that some of our leaders here in the United States exhibit. Well, our demand has been that formally, number one, determine that the Burmese military has committed genocide against the Rohingya people. This is absolutely imperative for the United States to do so. The House has passed a resolution on this. We need the State Department to officially, the State Department report that was conducted 2 years ago was the most scientifically proven report of this. I mean, just an absolute gem of a report done on this genocide. We also want full comprehensive sanctions on Burma, minus food and medicine, until the Burmese military stops the ongoing genocide, restores the democratically elected government, and changes the constitutional powers that allow the military to hamper civilian rule. This is extremely important because otherwise this game of sanctions, no sanctions, is going to be continued to play out. And we need to support civil society in Burma, but cannot just be like, they bring back the democratically elected government, but then the constitution still allows them to pull out another coup whenever they want. So these are our demands still of the White House, of the Biden administration. But where do you see this going? What are your, as we wrap up the hour pretty soon, what would you like to say to the people who are listening, who are concerned about the persecuted people in Burma, especially the Rohingya? What would you like to say to them?
Well, I think just to go back to what you were saying earlier, it was interesting to hear that, like the banging of pots and pans in Myanmar's Burma's is a way to get rid of evil, and that's one of the reasons people have been doing that. And I think when we look at solidarity actions, and when it comes to standing up for justice and being in solidarity, we shouldn't think that any action is too small, because every action counts. And of course, yes, we have to put pressure on the state, but things like looking up the dirty list and looking at the products on the dirty list. There's certain drinks, certain mobile companies, certain jewelers who are doing trade with the military. And if we can, in our everyday purchases, they call them citizen boycotts, in our purchases every day, if there's a way that we can give the Burmese military less money, then let's do that. But also coming out into the streets and raising our voices in solidarity is invaluable, because the oppressed people should never feel like they're alone in this. And it's an opportune moment, to put a spotlight on the Rohingya situation and what the Rohingya have been through. Because we must remember that even though this coup is happening, the Rohingya have been suffering these discriminatory laws since the late 70s. And even in Bangladesh right now, Rohingya can't go out and seek work. They're not being integrated into the community. And the Cox's Bazar is now, the world's largest refugee camp, made out of 35 camps. One of those, being closed slowly. The Bangladeshi government has decided to fence in all the entire mega camp, more surveillance, some check towers, more cameras. Rohingya children are not in the schooling system, so we're looking at a whole generation who might, miss out on schooling altogether. And so it's not just, Myanmar. Of course, we have to remember where the seat of the crime is, and of course, our international pressure must be there. But also asking the Bangladeshi government to please allow the Rohingya to have lives as normal, as possible in the situation in which they find themselves. And when we speak about that, we can't ignore Basanchar and the fact that this island that they want to move the Rohingya to, is an island that is flood prone. It's 3 hours away by boat. Rohingya who have been on that island, they didn't want to be there. They were not given an opportunity to speak to camp leaders who came on a go and see mission last year. And so, the Rohingya continued to suffer in the most terrible ways. And for a long time, there was an internet blackout, both in Myanmar, but also in the camps in Bangladesh. And so we mustn't take our eye, off the Rohingya situation. It's very important for us to keep that in the news while all of this is happening.
Thank you so much, Shabnam. And as we were going down that list of the dirty list, sometimes it doesn't surprise me that it's the same companies who show up again and again, whether it's the Uyghur genocide or the Rohingya genocide or affecting people in minorities in India, in Kashmir, in Africa. The Palestinians, Facebook, Apple, just for Americans who are watching Cloudflare, Flare. These are American companies that are complicit, and so for us to just simply look away and not hold our own companies responsible, and to not make sure that they are not, we keep buying from them, and so we're part of this horrific genocide when we really take a deep look at it. So at the least that you can do, please call, if you're here in the United States, please call Congress. Let them know what you feel about these sanctions. And the fact that the genocide still has not been declared. We're sharing with you in comments the way how you can take action. Just 3 minutes it takes to make that call to your local state senator, to your local senators, to your congresspeople, and let them know that you want these sanctions to be carried on until these three and until the genocide is being declared and stopped. Yes, go ahead.
And if there's one thing, if you find yourself saying, well, what can I do? They're so far away, what is it for me to do? I'm sitting all the way over here. Then the one thing that you can do is firstly educate yourself. And then we ask you to just tell one or two other people about the Rohingya, because it's still surprising how many people are not aware. And one of the things we've tried to do as at Protect the Rohingya, over the past 8 years, is that on our Twitter and on our Facebook, every week we update constantly with the news about the Rohingya and about the situation. And so if you don't know where else to look, start there. But of course, I'm sure on your website as well, the Burma Task Force, you have the same. And so just learn about the situation first, and then we ask you to just tell one other person.
Exactly. Sometimes we don't realize just just sitting down with somebody and letting them know what is going on. I mean, this is because just getting people. I remember the time where it was so hard for just people to pronounce the word Rohingya and to say it, and it took work, and it takes work, but still our work isn't done. There's so many who still do not know, are very, very illiterate about, because it seems so foreign, right? Like, who who are they? What can you do for them? So on your screen right now, you'll be seeing action alerts that you can do, that just to call Congress to pass these sanctions. So many people have called already, but we need to keep calling. And it just takes 2 seconds to put in your name and your phone number and to make the call. In the same way, you can send emails. You can email President Biden and ask him to increase the sanctions that are being put on. We do not feel like they're comprehensive enough. So we urge people to continue to take action and be a part of this movement to stop the genocide. Thank you so much, Shabnam, for being here and for your work. And really, while this entire thing was going on, we were too busy writing statements and, putting memos together and all of that. So I was so grateful for the Protect the Rohingya Twitter handle, because it was keeping me, I was like, okay, I can depend on them to keep me updated when I'm too busy to be on Twitter. But thank you so much for it's like education, awareness, and then actually doing the work on the ground. We look forward to seeing the compilation of the history, the Rohingya histories of the villages. Please let us know when it's ready. We'd love for you to come back on and show us the exhibit here on the show. So thank you so much for your time and your work.
It's always a team effort. So, we always watch the work that you and your team are doing, and we're very thankful for everyone that's working on the Rohingya issue. So keep up the great work.
Well, thank you all for being here and for your time. As always, keep attending our events. We have a fabulous lineup of an event on Saturday. The link will appear in comments and on the screen. This is the official launch of our Sri Lanka task force. We've been doing work behind the scenes for Sri Lanka for many years, but it is time that the Sri Lankan Muslims had their own task force where their concerns as a Muslim minority in Sri Lanka are highlighted and worked on a consistent basis. So please come and support us. Our team lead, Faris Hussain, who's a Sri Lankan American, will be moderating. We have Linda Sursor, as well as Shireen Sarur from Sri Lanka, human rights activist from Sri Lanka, who will be joining us, led by Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid, and the Minister of Parliament from Canada, Salma Zahid. So, oh yes, and I cannot forget Muslim Council of Britain's first woman president-elect, I believe she is. Really excited to host her on a Justice for All program. So do tune in February 13th, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. So see you then. Assalamu alaikum.